Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Gaming Symposium, home of awkward silences galore. I'm the Game Professor, and with me, of course, are the other members of the Symposium.
I'm EmceeProphit. I always talk first.
I'm Chris. I am also here.
I'm Red Angel. I always talk last.
Well, now you
That's
know
one way
all
of
of
doing
us, and
I like how we already have an awkward, comedic family dynamic after one episode.
one episode and lots of off-the-air discussion.
Yeah.
It works. Anyway, for those new to this podcast, basic idea is like a book club for games. Each of us 4 members of the Gaming Symposium take turns each month choosing a game that everyone plays, and then the next month we all talk about it and announce the next one, and so on and so forth. Today's game is Off. It is... Well, you know what? MC chose it. I'm going to let him explain it briefly.
Okay. So I'm going to attempt to not spoil very much in this summary, but after I do that and we have some general first impressions, we are going to start spoiling this pretty soon. Maybe we'll have a time indicator about when that starts.
Yeah, we'll warn you before we get into the spoilers, but
Cool.
For now you're safe. And there will be a link in the description if you want to download and play the game before listening to this.
Yep. It's not terribly long. It'll take you 6 hours or 5 hours. Now,
And it's free.
Off. Yeah, it's free. That's important. Off stars a mysterious warrior known as the Batter, who is controlled by the player, and the Batter openly addresses the player as his guide, frequently breaking the fourth wall and talking to the player in a somewhat unsettling manner. The Batter says at the beginning of his journey that he wants to purify the world, but he doesn't exactly explain what that really means. You then travel around the world helping the Batter do some very morally ambiguous purifying. I'm going to keep that vague. Which will eventually culminate in a lot of very significant moral decisions that are pretty ambiguous, and you're never really sure which side you should be on. But what's interesting about Off is that you're actually set on a linear path until the very end, where you only have one major decision to make. So it's a very interesting game about morality. It's set in a very surreal environment. It has very classical RPG gameplay with some puzzle elements. But for the most part, the thing that makes it stand out is its bizarre atmosphere, creepy music, surreal horror elements, and just its general moral ambiguity, which results in a pretty thought-provoking game and a fun thing to talk about with your pretentious friends. So there you go.
We are all pretentious friends.
Yes!
Yes, we are.
As evidenced by the fact that this game that we're talking about here is an independently developed French surreal RPG game.
Yeah,
So-
made by a guy named Mortis Ghost.
Oh gosh, really?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that's how you know. I forget the musician's name, but it was literally made by just those two people.
Oh
Just the
no.
musician and the designer.
Avery something? Let me go look.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Well, all right. So, as was mentioned, we're going to talk first just about our general impressions, kind of what we thought of the game, and then once we're all done with that, we will go into full-on spoiler territory and talk about everything in detail and try and figure out what the heck this game is trying to say, and what we think it means. So, whoever wants to go first talking about their basic thoughts. Cat, I told you not to do this! No, I'm sorry, you don't... There are lots of places in the house you can be aside from this corner. I'm sorry, no, get out of here. No, you're
They're
cute.
precious
but
gifts
leave.
from above.
I'm almost positive I just heard a sad meow.
Yeah, that happened.
You did.
Oh,
I
that was so
shooing her
sad.
away gently, but she was just sad, and now she's being all snuggly.
It's the emotional rejection that she can't handle.
Yeah. Well, all right.
See, mine
well,
is calmly sleeping on her bed. That's what mine's doing right now.
That's nice. I'm sure my other one is doing that, but this one is younger and probably a little inbred, and found her as a stray when she was 3 weeks old, so she's
Yes.
special.
You better leave that in.
I'll decide later whether to edit out this whole kerfuffle or not. Anyway, Kat, I'm sorry, you gotta go. No, stop that. Now she attacked me. Okay, anyway, who wants to talk about this video game first?
I guess I will. We have a formula going.
That's true.
Overall, I really enjoyed it, particularly from just a storytelling standpoint. I like the atmosphere, the art. It's all very trippy, very weird. It doesn't look or feel anything like any other game I've ever played. It has this bizarre sketchbook art style. It's just delightfully disturbing in a really cool way. My one issue that I do take with the game is the gameplay is incredibly basic. It's one of the most basic RPGs you can possibly get, which is okay for what it is because it's a short game, but it is very repetitive. It kind of has what I like to call the Earthbound problem, meaning the story, the polish, the atmosphere, the characters, like all that stuff is really interesting and fun. But good God, the primary combat is literally just mashing a single button over and over again because everything dies really fast and it's not a very hard game. So, like that is a bit of a problem, and I would be a lot harsher on it if it was a longer game. But since it's short and free and fun and weird, I can forgive it. So that's really my only major complaint. But I do like it overall, and I do think that it's pretty thought-provoking, but I don't want to get into that part yet.
Yeah.
I want to say that I just adore the sound design in this game. Like, I really love the way the entire game sounds. Like, the opening of the game has basically you're on an island, and they just have this like water splooshing sound the whole time you're walking around, and it feels completely at odds with what a real like place would sound like. It's not like lapping waves of ocean waves crashing. It's like someone pouring one cup of water into another cup of water, and yet so it like conveys this idea of liquidiness without actually going there. And it does stuff like that throughout the whole game. At one point you're on a sea of meat, and they sell you that by having this squishy noise as you're sailing around on it. Even just the combat music is this sort of like, it sounds kind of like a sitar-y sort of thing going on. The sound design is fantastic. I really, that's my favorite thing about the game, I think. And just in general, I really, really enjoyed that and the surrealist tone. I would have to agree with MC that it really is this bizarre tone that is, it's not quite body horror, but it's also not really like, it's surrealist with like sort of a mean edge to it in terms of like how it approaches its surrealism. It's sort of surrealist pseudo horror, but not quite. I'm not sure how to describe it.
Yeah, it's genuinely unsettling.
It's more psychological horror than anything else. If
definitely.
you had to go the horror route.
Yeah,
very much so. I made a joke at the end of the last podcast that everything just feels off, and it's a horrible pun, and I feel bad about it, but it's also just true. Like, it's you're playing, and like, even if you can't necessarily put your finger on exactly what it is, just nothing, it just feels unsettling. It always just feels like something isn't quite right.
Like, one of my favorite things that they do is the whole minerals thing. That each island, each zone is responsible for manufacturing certain materials. And like, I one of the most horrific ones to me was the one where they have to harvest cows by cutting open the cows to get at the ore inside of them. Like, just the idea that these cows are growing up with these giant boulders inside, and we have to cut the cows apart to get these hard stones that should not be in biological flesh. And then to do that, and then the way they describe it, it's on top of like pixelated scenes from like 1950s cow, I don't know, not instruction manuals. Cows don't come with instruction manuals, but like guides to farming in the 1950s. Stock photos, basically, old stock photos of cows. And it's just this disturbing image.
Yeah, because it's presented as, this is just our normal life. What's wrong? I'm just explaining to you my job.
The images were more sketches from the 1900s and to the 1950s, not to the 1960s, but it was sort of an assembly line-esque thing that it had going on. I remember looking this stuff up a lot, and I kept coming across when I looked stuff up about the game.
Cool.
Weird.
Yeah, well, that's part of what makes it so surreal. It has such a it like presents all this otherworldly stuff as perfectly normal and just accepted.
Yeah.
Like even the batter doesn't really like blink an eye at any of this stuff. He just kind of accepts it. Everyone does.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that if I were to, give it a review or anything, I'd basically say what MC said. Just the whole art style, the presentation, the story, all that stuff. It's really, really interesting. And the only thing that I really took issue with was, the gameplay, which just isn't that big a deal in this scenario. Like, it's obviously not what the game is focusing on. It's not the point of playing it, and it is short enough that it's not a big deal. And generally, like, the everyday battles I was fine with. I only really got frustrated in boss battles when it just kind of went on for a long time without being that interesting.
Yeah.
But I mean, minor things really. It was definitely an experience that I appreciated and am still trying to figure out. Hopefully this podcast will help with that.
I have to wonder how much of the bad combat is just a result of sort of RPG Maker dictating form. Not that you can't do cool things with it. Oh, go ahead.
That's what I was thinking, that it was RPG Maker that was limiting it a little bit. Not as much as fault of the game as it is RPG Maker. But even then, even with it being RPG Maker or what have you, it still works. It's basic, but it works.
Yeah.
It's a good cog in the machine, even if it doesn't make the machine go super fast. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking as an RPG maker, I can pretty much just like I've been using that stuff since I was like 13. And you can do anything you want with it. You can make a 3D game with it. You can make a strategy game. You can make an action game, a platformer, whatever. It's just that that wasn't the focus. So like it could have been better. Like I'm speaking as someone who's currently making a really customized RPG Maker engine. So it could have been better, but I'm okay with it. But it wasn't the RPG Maker. But, yeah. It's just really it's like the basic classic stuff of like, here you get some elemental attacks and you can heal, and that's it.
The element of plastic.
Yep, the element of plastic and meat. Good stuff.
Yeah, what an interesting one. Any other general thoughts on it before we kick into all the spoilers?
I think we're good. I'm good.
I'm good.
Sounds like. All right. So then, from this point on, since EmceeProphit is the one who chose this game for us to play, he's going to be leading discussion. I think he's got some questions and stuff just to kind of lead it around, and we'll see where it all goes. And so that's what's happening now. The spoilers will, of course, abound after this point. We're going to ruin everything. In fact, I think we're going to give a quick synopsis of the story, too, so you're going to find out all of the messed up things that happen in this game. If it seems like it's interesting to you, I'm sure we'd all recommend that you give it a shot.
Yeah.
And like we said, it's free. Link is in the description. You can play it. It's not that long. And then you'll probably get a lot more out of this discussion than if you did not. But, your choice. So now we will ruin everything for you.
Yep. I'm about to do the synopsis, like the actual synopsis now.
Yep.
Again, still keeping it very literal, because that's kind of how you have to do it with this game, because a lot of it is very theory-driven. It's a game that was actually meant to be interpreted. A lot of stuff is pretty vague. So I'm just going to tell you literally what happens. As I said before, the batter wants to purify the world, and that's his only stated mission. So he travels around the world killing various specters, ghosts, and eventually killing the various leaders and even the queen of all the land, and a mysterious infant. And after he kills the leader of each land, their world becomes this nightmarish hellscape, like a purgatory, infested with strange monsters that look like deformed infants. And this is actually what happens. And after you kill the queen and supposedly her quote-unquote child, the infant. And yes, you do in fact kill an infant in this game. You have the option of assisting the batter in hitting a gigantic off switch, which will effectively end all life and existence in this world as a whole, or you can switch sides and take charge of a character called the Judge, a strange cat-like being that effectively serves as the moral authority at the end of your journey. The Judge scolds you, the player, for going along with the batter's adventure this far and not stopping to question what you were doing. And then if you side with the Judge, you kill the batter, and only a few residents, including the Judge himself, continue to live, but the world is forever changed by what the batter and you have done. So yeah, that's the story.
It's incredibly cheerful. It's fun for the whole family.
It was actually marketed. Well, I don't know if marketed is the right word since it wasn't for sale, but it was promoted with the catchphrase, a cute game for nice children.
Oh no.
Well then.
Oh no.
So there you go.
Well, it's got about the same level of dissonance that the game itself does, so I guess it's fitting.
Oh, yeah. So, getting into the actual questions, the first one that I want to ask is, since throughout this journey you're killing a lot of people with very little to go off of in terms of moral direction, did you ever feel sorry for your enemies initially? And did you feel sorry or morally conflicted later on? And you guys can answer that whenever you want.
Well, I mean, we murdered a baby, so I think that if we didn't feel morally conflicted by that point, something's wrong.
See,
or we just really hate babies. That might also be a factor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. The game takes great pains to make sure that there's a clear difference between the batter and the player. And I never really felt directly responsible for anything that the batter was doing. It never really struck me that, like, I am role-playing the batter and I am taking this decision to, beat a baby to death with a baseball bat. It was more like, oh, that's what he's doing. Well, I guess I'm his strategist. I'm going to tell him how best to do it, but I'm not involved directly. So I never really felt like, oh God, what have I done? I'm like, well, we sure have screwed up, haven't we, Bat-Her? You are the one that was directing all of this. So I never felt, personally responsible for a lot of that stuff.
That's an interesting thing, because I kind of feel like that's a moral disconnect that they were kind of going for, to kind of mess with how you felt about the whole situation.
Yeah, it definitely had a similar games where what you're doing isn't necessarily actually a good thing, and that, starts becoming clear as it goes on. Things like Spec Ops or Shadow of the Colossus or something have had kind of a similar, just as it goes, do you start feeling bad for what you're doing thing going on. And, even if I don't think any of them went so far as intentionally killing a baby with a baseball bat,
Yeah.
But I think those games have an innate problem that this game kind of sidesteps, right? Like Spec Ops, you're forced to kill everything, and you are, I can't remember the guy's name, but you are that corporal that goes and shoots all the guys. It's a much more directly controlled one-to-one relationship between that specific player character.
Yeah.
And that kind of makes the game fall into this rut of like, you're forced to kill a bunch of people. Ha ha ha, you're the bad guy. We made you kill people, so you're the jerk. And this game kind of, I think, sidesteps that by being able to criticize the batter's action without making it just be like criticizing the player and the player's actions, right? Like, it's not just going, you're the idiot for playing the game that we made for you, and instead sort of says, the batter is a bad guy. You can join me or not, but the batter is clearly a bad guy, and it does so without needlessly throwing the player under the bus.
That's true.
If
That's
anything,
what I really like about it.
Yeah. If anything, it kind of just says you're complicit and guilty by association in that way, but the game doesn't really spend a lot of time lecturing you. It's kind of the thing is, like, you're kind of left to interpret how you should feel about it for yourself. You're not just lectured by the game like you described in Spec Ops.
Yeah.
So
I guess there is a slight difference in what they're going for in terms of like this one's just trying to bring up the moral issues, whereas stuff like that is often trying to make a commentary on games themselves as well, and our willingness to just kind of go along with things. Whereas I didn't really get the feeling that this one was doing that.
Yeah.
Did anybody feel incredibly guilty even before all of the terrible stuff started happening? Because I still felt bad. I see these little ookie bookie ghost things, and they're just floating around, and I felt bad hitting them. I just saw it and I went, "Oh, I'm sorry. You're not even doing anything. You're just sitting there floating. I apologize. Batter, this is not okay." But he's just batting away. So I go, "Okay, well, I guess I'll help."
Yeah.
Well, we did later see the ghosts kill someone.
Yeah, that was when I went, "Okay, kill him. It's fine.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Yeah.
Never mind. Guilt's gone."
Exactly.
Yeah.
See,
Yeah,
like, for me, it was the bird.
Same. Yeah.
That was the point at which I kind of realized, like, okay, I mean, this guy has clearly gone completely insane, but in a very sad way.
Do you remember one of the lines they said?
What?
Where when the batter says, "I've come to liberate the world of malignants," and he goes, "Oh, really? Well then, can you liberate me?" And then he turns into one of the burnt.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
That gut punched me. I just went, "Oh no, I'm so sorry."
Yeah, as it went, it definitely started being more like I'll admit I didn't feel bad for the ghosts at first, if only because ghosts in fantasy games are kind of like Nazis in World War II games. Like they're largely there because they're just kind of obviously evil, and it's very easy to take the game at its word that if they're not nice, then they're not, and you should kill them. So like that didn't get to me too much, but once it started getting to stuff like that, where NPCs, and I think that was just like early on in World 2, the NPCs would start, or it might even have been in World 1, where the NPCs started kind of going crazy and attacking you and saying things like that, that I started actually feeling bad. Even before then, I did feel uncomfortable with it, but that's because the entire game just makes you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
What about the one in the tunnel? The one that didn't even attack you, just kept screaming help at you while you were just standing there hitting it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That definitely got to me.
That was a mercy killing that we had to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was nothing he could do, and there's nothing we could do other than kill him. And you couldn't even flee. I tried.
Yeah, I know. I tried too.
Yeah, no, the one in the tunnel was definitely one of the more gut-punchy moments for me.
Especially with how abrupt it is, because if I recall correctly, that scene was just kind of like, you walk up to the guy and he says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm in your way, I'm stuck, I can't move," and then it just transfers to the battle like abruptly.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the moments where it was easiest for me, because I guess I'm used to, like, I see what you were saying, Chris, about how, you're separated from the batter, but I guess I'm just, like, I knew that I was because the game made that clear, but I'm so used to identifying with the characters I play in video games that's like the default mode in the majority of games, that I didn't necessarily feel that disconnect so much as I just, intellectually knew it was there. But that was definitely one moment where I'm like, where it occurred to me that the batter wasn't even considering other options. He was just killing the thing that was in his way, even when it was obviously not a necessary thing to do.
Yeah, I think that scene's important just because it is the first point where unavoidably, unequivocally, the batter is shown in a negative light, and it's not... I think that's there basically so that you don't reach the end of the game and go, "Wait, what? Huh?"
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I was still saying many of those things, but yes, I agree.
Oh, sorry.
No, just about different things, I guess. Because, the batter was definitely evil and all that. But there were still plenty of confusing elements about it all by the end.
The next element that we want to talk about, and me and Sam already talked about this a little bit, but we can elaborate a bit if you want. This is a general question. Did you enjoy the gameplay, the puzzles, the combat, all that stuff? Or did you find it slow and repetitive and sort of a bit of filler? And if so, how much did that affect your enjoyment of the game? Me and Sam already answered this, but if you guys want to...
to an extent, but the puzzles are actually another thing worth noting that we didn't really talk about before.
Yeah.
Because I think playing this game kind of highlighted to me, I guess, that when you have a turn-based system like this with random encounters and all that stuff, that it is kind of important to have something along the lines of puzzles to break up that monotony. Because even a really fun battle system can eventually get annoying when you're just getting interrupted walking around all the time and nothing else happens. And for the purpose of that, I think that these puzzles did the job quite well. They were very simple. Like, I was never particularly stumped or engaged by them, but it was a way to break up the monotony, and they weren't the stupid sphere puzzles from Final Fantasy X or anything, you know, stupid, frustrating, and kind of confusing. They just were there so that I was doing something other than killing things for a minute, and then got me back. And I think that kind of like the gameplay in general worked for what the game was doing.
Yeah, I think that the puzzles definitely helped add some variety. I liked the puzzles overall. They were definitely the highlight in terms of actual interaction with the environment. So, yeah, I would agree. Awkward silence.
I will fully admit that I was kind of bad at the number-related puzzles, just the number box puzzles. And I don't want to say, oh, it's not my fault, but when I was doing it, I wrote them down, and then I had to say them out loud, because I have this thing, dyscalculia, where I see numbers backwards. And it's a genuine thing where I have to go, okay, is this right? Okay, I think this is right. And I had to redo it a couple of times, so it took me probably a little longer than I care to admit to do certain puzzles near the end there.
That does make sense.
It still put me to the limits, though. That's what I liked about it. It tested me. It tested my patience. Well, not my patience, but I liked it. I liked it overall.
Yeah.
I have no complaints.
Yeah, I liked the puzzles. I think they really were the highlight of the game in terms of overall design. They felt really kind of delicately balanced for a game like this, hard enough that you actually had to take notes. I ended up using my phone to just screen capture what was going on regularly throughout the game, because there's a lot of, here's a number and walk 10 minutes that way to use it, and I'm like, I'm just going to take a snapshot with my phone.
Yeah, I did that a lot too, and in fact I think I still have like a receipt or something random that I wrote some numbers down on at one point.
I did the same. I actually still have my off notes text document.
Same.
But that said, even though the puzzles are, I think, the strongest element of play, they don't feel thematically tied into pretty much anything, whereas the combat at least kind of seems thematically relevant in terms of it's the batter doing the purging, which is tied into the overall concept. So even though combat is really, really dry and really, really boring and really, really straightforward, and you can just auto your way through most of them, that at least felt like it was relevant to what was happening in the game world, whereas eventually you would just reach a door where it's like, okay, what's the number? What do we do to figure this number out? I don't know. And it's a fun puzzle, but it's just disconnected entirely, I think, anyway, from a lot of what the game is otherwise trying to accomplish.
Yeah, the vast majority of them are very gamey. Only a few of them make any sense in terms of the actual fabric of the world. And those are basically just flipping on and off switches, again, which is, I guess, thematically relevant.
I did notice that for a long time the on and off switches were set to on and you turned them off. Which I know, most games, it's like, oh, we'll turn this thing on now. But you were turning stuff off, almost, basically until such a point where it got to the puzzles where you had to, flip different switches at different times and stuff. It was always turning them off, which is just an interesting random little note.
Nice little foreshadowing. Okay. I think that's everyone. I always have to check.
Yep.
Now, this is the big one. It'll probably dominate the rest of this discussion. What did you think the game was about, literally, and what did you think it was about in terms of subtext and theming? So that is the big one. And you don't have to, write like a 10-page novel on it. We might all make videos on this game at some point, but, general thoughts. What do you think literally happened, if you can even describe that, and what do you think it was trying to say thematically?
I don't know if there is a literal in this game. I mean, it's a surrealist game where most of it is allegory and metaphor. I'm not sure there's meant to be a literal reality, but I mean, I'm not certain of that.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those where even if you're not certain what it all means as you're playing through it, you can just kind of tell that everything means something aside from what you're seeing.
Yeah.
I actually agree with that. That's actually kind of how I feel about it. I do think that they're going for something pretty specific, but everything is so intentionally strange and otherworldly that it's very hard to sit down and say this is literally the backstory of the world and what exactly happened, because it's very nonsensical and surreal.
Yeah, there's like little bullet points that are floating around about it, where it's like certain elements of the game you can kind of piece together for what the literal is, but it's not entirely woven together, so you can easily disregard certain aspects of it.
Yeah,
once I finished it, I was thinking about it a lot, and I kind of ran into, I think I mentioned in the first episode, I love symbolism and metaphor, but it's probably one of my in terms of being able to figure it out, it's probably one of my weakest areas when it comes to all this criticism stuff. And I could think of a whole lot of potential things that it might be going for, but I always felt like there was one or another thing about it that wouldn't fit with whatever theory I was coming up with.
Yeah.
And I don't know, a lot of ideas floating around in my head, but I was never quite able to concretely, coalesce them into one theory.
I have a couple thousand. Couple of thousand million trillion.
Yeah.
We'll give us some of your favorites.
Honestly, this one's gonna sound really weird, but I couldn't get those images out of my head where they kept showing the different images of how the factories worked. I thought it was a lot of subtext for Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, that sort of universe, early 1900s system. And I was wondering, and with the meat river, I was thinking, oh, that's like the meat packaging factory, because my grandmother told me that that's how the meat packaging would look. It looked like a big river of ugly, gross meat. And since they didn't have standards back then for what goes in the meat, you could be eating your friend Bobby and you don't know what's going on. And I was thinking that maybe this was some sort of allegorical interpretation of that period where all these people were sitting up in their ivory towers and they didn't care about the workers underneath, even if they did end up ground into meat or killed or sent to a void or something of that nature. I thought about that one a lot, and I've been reading The Jungle by Upton Sinclair just for this, and that's what I've been thinking about.
I think that's a valid angle to talk. I've never heard about that idea, about like that's what the game is about, but I kind of like it, because now I'm thinking like, all the workers, the working class, for some reason the name is escaping me right now, but they have like a general Elson. There we go. All the Elsons, they're effectively the working class. They're insecure. They're very socially awkward. They don't stand up for themselves, and they're weak. They are the powerless class in this world, and they're exploited for labor. They're the ones who do all the hard work to get the meat, the plastic, the smoke, and the metal that makes the world function.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's that's honestly an interesting idea, because like all the people at the top, the leaders of all the zones, they do genuinely seem pretty abusive in some way or another.
Yeah.
To say the very least.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's an interesting idea. Yeah. Any other ideas?
Yes. I've been doing this for the past couple of days. I've been trying to work out the right ideas just for this. So I had another idea. Maybe the baby Hugo, which is his name, who is he's not the Batter's son, because apparently that was mistranslated, but the Batter and the Queen represent his mother and father, how he views them. Maybe because I was thinking that maybe he created these worlds himself and he's a psychic baby, because there's a lot of those, and maybe it's because I've read Stephen King recently. That might be it. But maybe he created all of these zones and he put people that he viewed as his guardians in each of these zones. And he made his mother figure who loved him and left him alone in his room. And he was, even though he was still dying of all these experiments and horrible things that they were doing to him, he created this world to escape to it while these things were happening to him. Now his dad somehow has gotten into this world, or an image of his dad, and is forcing him to try to wake up. And the kid has way beyond normal intelligence, because with all this imagery he uses, he has different ideas of how the world works. And it's kind of, I know this is kind of really out there, but I've been thinking that it might be more of a sci-fi angle. Just spitballing.
Huh. Well, no, I think that the first part of your theory about it being a world that the baby effectively created, and the fact that the batter and the queen are just representatives of the mother and the father, I think that's actually loosely connected to a pretty popular theory, that it's effectively a dream being had by Hugo.
Yeah, that's definitely something that struck me as a possibility. I hadn't quite gone so far as to get into the psychic baby parts of it, but it definitely seemed as though it may be some kind of, psychic mind space, or maybe something along the lines of, like early Silent Hill games, where the location, everything going on is an exploration of someone's psyche or something.
Yep.
It definitely gives off that vibe in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. I have my own little twist on the interpretation. So I guess I'll go next. Like you said, my actual theory is Hugo is a baby who is in dire health. It was in like really bad health of some kind of disease, possibly terminal, or has been abused or wounded, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he's being kept alive via life support, and he's in a coma, hallucinating all of this shit. And because he's a kid, he has a very limited understanding of how the world works, which is why he thinks, they just get meat from the meat fountain. They just get plastic by, I don't know, they must find it inside an animal or something. They mine smoke from from the underground and all this other stuff. Like even the fact that we write letters to someone and then they send plastic back. That's how we get plastic. It seems like a very childish understanding of how the world works, because it's a process that has no actual origin. It's just, it appears because it does. And another aspect of it that kind of makes me think that is all of these elements to the world, the details, and just the way that the world functions and the way that it looks. It's very sterile, and it's very sterile, it's very rigid. And that might just be because of, that was just the graphical style they were going for. But everything kind of looks so artificial, like it's a hallway. There's a lot of hallways that look like they're just, very generic white or beige buildings. Or just like a single color dominates the entire thing. And this could totally just be my personal experience talking, because I've spent a decent amount of time in hospitals and have some bad memories there. Both for personal reasons and mostly for family reasons. I feel like he sees the world in terms of hospitals and their architecture. And I know that's a bit of a stretch, but since everything looks so sterile and clean and simple and repetitive and uniform, and the fact that he's constantly coughing, and the fact that he seems to always be right on the verge of death, and then of course there is finally turning off the switch, which might be the switch to life support, because maybe the mother and father disagree ethically about keeping the baby alive as a vegetable, So maybe the father wants to grant him a quote-unquote merciful death of some kind. Or maybe the father is abusive. There's a lot of, because, like the batter represents the father in this theory. So there's a lot of wiggle room as to what exactly is going on and the motivations of the characters. And the one last thing that I want to make a note of, I know that this was a long ramble. Whenever you purify a particular zone by killing that zone's leader, what's the only enemy that shows up in that area? It's a deformed infant. So I feel like that can't be a coincidence. So, that's my theory. I thought about it for a long time. I plan on kind of developing that theory for a spooky Halloween special at some point. So, that's my idea.
I like it.
Yeah, there's a lot there for it in the game.
Yeah.
What do you think, Camster?
It's hard to process this game.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that one.
I mean, especially because, at least to me, it feels like there's almost two halves to it, but they're not really halves. It's sort of like the first 3/4 of the game and then the last quarter of the game have completely different tones and sort of overarching themes. Like, I would agree with Red that the first part of the game, the first 3/4 of the game, has this sort of like vague, I don't want to say like anti-capitalist sentiment, but like production is framed as this grotesque, surreal perversion of how things are actually made. Again, you cut open cows to get at the ore inside of them. To make sugar, we literally throw the bodies of the dead into a furnace, and then that turns them into sugar. And then we also disperse that sugar as a reward system, in a bit of a Soylent Green reference, basically feed the Elsons, making the sugar a bit of themselves to keep them going. Like, it's just all of the production is framed as horrific and exploitative and harmful, and then you come in and cleanse it, and then also make it, in a way much worse, because now things are sort of this new nightmare world. And then meanwhile, on the other side of production, there's all the consumption, and that's framed as sort of this weird, toothless, emasculating experience. Roller coasters that go nowhere, that you just sort of sit literally in some chairs and go, wee! Libraries without books, a populace that's basically horrified at its own existence. All of the Elsons are just petrified of anything. I don't know if there's a cohesive idea in there, and if there is, maybe I missed it, but I do feel like those two motifs those two ideas are sort of carried around by the first 3/4 of the game, and then suddenly in the last quarter of the game, it takes the shift towards a much more domestic, family-oriented worldview, where you're talking about the bosses of the previous zones are now your friends, and you're talking about Hugo the baby and a missing mom, and setting the entire final zone inside basically a house or a single room sometimes. Finding the connective tissue between those two things, to me, is really, really hard. I'm not sure I have a single coherent thematic angle that goes through both of them. The one conclusion I think I kind of reached, and it's not nearly as supported as what MC just said, because he has a lot of evidence. I kind of viewed it as somewhat allegorical, and I don't know how much of the text I can actually use to support this, but I kind of dig the idea that the batter represents something somewhere between nihilism and depression, that is sort of basically slowly taking over this baby's psyche. And I think the baby itself is allegorical. I don't know necessarily if there is a literal baby, but clearly that's the person whose mind we're interested in protecting or watching slowly be corroded by the batter. And I view that the whole process of killing these ghosts that are tormenting this baby's psyche as sort of depression and or nihilism, shutting down these things that are perceived to be bad, but instead of confronting them, he's just destroying them, and then shutting off his own psyche and shutting himself down in a sense. But again, that's a really, really weak interpretation compared to what MC has. So I'd be more open to tearing into that one.
I personally really like those kinds of things, so I'm a fan of that. yeah, the idea of it all being a representation of something happening within the psyche like that, and I like that.
It's definitely a very psychological game.
Yeah.
And I don't think you should.
Is.
Yeah, I don't think you should beat yourself up, Camster. I think that's like legitimately another interesting way of interpreting it.
Well, and I mean that's basically
that's kind of the point of this game.
That process that you had trying to figure it all out is very similar to what was going on with me, because I mean I could have, I had a kind of similar idea there. I had an idea that it might be like almost like a fantasy representation of what's going on in this kid's mind as an abusive father the batter is rampaging around or something, like all sorts of ideas. But I feel like whenever there were a whole lot of little allegorical things that stood out to me as I went on, like the very first time that you come across the people working in production stuff, there are a bunch of miners who look absolutely horrible and unhealthy and are talking about how they work to find smoke in the ground because they can't breathe without smoke, and the idea of working so hard for something that actually probably isn't very good for them. And then things like the 3 guardians of each zone later on near the end, what they're talking about, creating this world for you, I guess, for the batter, made me wonder if maybe these were all figures in his life and the batter is a representation of like the baby is the batter when he was younger or something. Like all of these different ideas came into my mind, but I have not quite been able to put them together into anything cohesive. I haven't found a way to make them all fit in my mind. But it's a lot of interesting stuff.
The baby created everything. That's sort of implied that the baby, all of this is a result of the baby, but then it's also implied that the queen and the batter are at least representational of the baby's parents.
Yeah.
But then the batter is also sort of originated when the baby reads a comic book containing a bunch of batters as villains in a comic book, which sort of sets up the batter to be a villain. And it's just sort of
the comic book his dad gave him.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. I actually forgot about that. Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that up. I forgot about it too.
And his dad would always visit him in whatever hospital that thing was. But he was really wanting to see his mom, but his dad was the one that always visited. He kept saying he didn't like his dad.
Yeah.
Sorry. That just smacked me in the side of the head, and I went, I need to tell them that now. Go.
Well, yeah, no, like that's the thing. I think that it's pretty clear that given the way that the batter acts towards, the one huge thing that makes it seem like the dad is just unequivocally an abusive figure is actually all the other characters for me, because particularly like not just the 3 bosses of the zones, but actually also the Elsen. Because when I think of how cowardly and afraid the Elsen are, they represent the general populace, right? Like that's pretty much what they represent. They're like the average citizen. They're the average person.
Yeah.
And I feel like in this baby's mind, he must be so scared and sad all the time that he thinks everyone is like that.
That'd make a lot of sense.
Which is one of the most depressing ideas I've ever had about this game.
Yeah. The thing that throws me off a little about that, though, is the difference in the representation of those 3 characters later on. Because when they're bosses, they all seem at least kind of vaguely horrible. The first one, Daydan or whatever, is just a horrible person. And, obviously so. The bird is, I don't know, something disturbed me a lot about him. Yeah, might have, delusional, and, he was kind of fighting you with the corpse of the judge's brother hanging from his neck, and that was a little disturbing. The third guy, all of them were viewed as negative figures. But then when you get to them in the flashbacks or whatever is going on later on in that last
Zone Zero,
they don't come across that way. They come across as kind and helpful, and
they're very supportive.
Yeah, so something, I guess theoretically one of those 2 representations of them is the, quote unquote, what's actually happening. And the other one, I don't know if they were nice figures that got corrupted in this baby's mind or something, or vice versa. I'm not sure what to do with it.
a part of me kind of thinks that maybe, kind of going in line with my theory of, just this this whole world representing how the baby sees the father as abusive. He kind of like the batter is aggressive towards these entities that the baby considers either friends or just positive elements in his life that the batter is crushing and destroying. Because when you get to the last zone, it's a psychological look into Hugo's head more than anything else. Like, I think that we would all agree on that, right? Like,
Yeah.
Because it's much more allegorical, it's much more abstract, and it's where you meet Hugo, and it's where you learn the most about Hugo and the Queen and everything. So, I would say that since you're in Hugo's mind, you're kind of seeing the world through his eyes. So that's pretty much it. Like you're seeing the world through his eyes for a change, and now all the horrible, evil things that you've been beating and destroying are things that Hugo loves and values.
Oh. It does seem that there's maybe like a perspective shift that's more implied than explicit in as you progress through the game. When I can't remember exactly when the tunnel scene happens. Does that happen towards the end of the game?
Zone 3?
Yeah, like near the end of Zone 3.
2/3 of the way through.
Yeah.
Because I feel like maybe that would be a good inflection point where things start bending the other way, but then you still have to fight the boss, so that's not, I guess, a great point. But
no, I think that's definitely the point where like it smacks you in the face, like, okay, like you were probably suspicious before, but now it's like the batter's kind of a dick. This is your wake-up call.
Yeah.
So I do think that that's a pretty good moment to point out.
And then after that, it basically you enter in the room or zone, the room, and from there it's basically more from Hugo's perspective viewing a lot of these things. The batter doesn't say that much during that bit.
He's really quiet until you meet the Queen. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that that's exactly right, because you're right. Like the batter basically says nothing in the last area until it's the final confrontation.
The other thing is that in the final area, time is marching backwards, and I don't know if that should be relevant in terms of how we view whether these people are currently evil or not.
Yeah, that is like the whole thing with the zone like the zone leaders. That is one of the big things that it's like that is kind of strange and ambiguous, but I do think that it's like, I feel like that it's about that perspective shift, because to the batter, they're evil and we're erasing these things, and like Hugo is like kind of flashbacking to when things were simple and happy and he had good things in his life, represented by the three nice characters. And then like the beginning of the game is kind of about the batter going around fucking everything up. That's like how I interpret it anyway. Because you're right, like the room is about time marching backwards.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And then there's all the...
Game.
Sorry.
No, I was just saying this is a complicated game.
It is.
It really is. There's all the dialogue that the Queen says to you. Remember when you're fighting, I don't know if you guys blew through her or if you lasted a little longer like I did in the fight, but she does all of those dialogue bits where what she says actually hurts the batter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Her lines, "You don't even know his name.
Yeah,
There's nothing but the void after me." And her entire dialogue, and "He loves you not." All of these little bits of dialogue with her, she's directing them at the batter about Hugo, because this is in his head, I guess. But it's interesting that hurts the batter so much, because up until this point, he didn't show any reaction to almost anything.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good... Oh my god.
Huh.
I just had a Jimmy Neutron brain blast. Like maybe the batter in this weird fucked up way is like, like the father's kind of coming to this and is like genuinely feels guilty for how he treated Hugo, the baby, and now that the baby is like so, you know, messed up and so physically crippled and so unhealthy, maybe the batter feels like the only good thing that he can do is to end it. And like this is his actual attempt, bizarrely, at redemption, purification, wiping the slate clean. I don't know, just an idea.
Yeah.
And in that same train of thought, her last dialogue bit, "Look, he has your eyes," and the batter's response, "They're full of fear."
Yeah, I have that written down here too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So even the batter, even though we've seen him up till this point so stoic, he's scared of something. He's scared of what he's about to do. Is he scared of the monster he's going to become? Is he scared of the judge?
I think that he's scared of himself.
Yeah, because he turns into that
I'd
thing.
like to think so.
Yeah, like, I don't really think that he's afraid of the judge.
Is he afraid of the monkeys in the special ending?
Oh God, should we even talk about that?
There's some monkeys, everybody.
Well, I mean, yeah.
I mean, yeah. That's how I feel about it too.
We could probably acknowledge it. I don't know if it warrants much discussion.
Well, it brings up a good point in terms of there being, according to the game itself, a canonical sad ending and a non-canonical second ending, and then a third ending with monkeys. But I think the two the two endings on offer, I think, are worth discussing, and how they frame things differently.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, the two normal ones definitely are, which also actually brings me to an interesting thing that we haven't really brought up all that much in our discussion of what it means so far, which is the judge, and exactly what his role is in everything, and what he means. I will say he was definitely the most sympathetic character to me, if only because did we all go back to the worlds once they were all black and white and hellish? Because that scene with him on the rooftop was genuinely like really sad to me. That he was just up there where his brother had died, or I guess like had been taken over previously and died or whatever, and was just up there meowing at the top of this building, saying that occasionally he can even feel like the echo is the voice of his brother instead, was really sad to me. But he's an interesting figure in the whole story.
Yeah. He's an odd one. If anything, I would say, like, the only theory that I was able to come up with him was that he was literally the batter's self-judgment and the only thing that could possibly hold him back.
He kind of failed at that job then, didn't he?
Yeah.
Didn't even try doing anything until it was already way too late.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a testament to how, determined the batter was that this was what he had to do.
Yeah.
There's also just a really nice undercurrent of, just not questioning your own moral perspective.
That's true.
That's another strong one, which I think is more just pure subtext. But it's really well done subtext, because the batter is just like, these people seem bad, they're bad, I'm gonna kill them.
Yeah. Which is, again, too, a very video gamey thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's been a very common thing in recent years for games to try to subvert that, but still, generally speaking, the game tells you who to kill, and you're like, oh, they're the bad guys, cool, and don't think twice about it.
I was thinking a little bit on the lines of, because I think I've seen most people notice that he's very much like the Cheshire Cat from the Alice in Wonderland books.
Yes.
Only creepier.
Yeah, he's more like American McGee's Alice in Wonderland's Cheshire Cat than anything else. And I was wondering if that's the role he took, if the Cheshire Cat had a more active role in the story, and the player represents his own version of Alice, and he's trying to guide them through it, but can't handle it after his brother gets what's the proper term for that? Exploded?
Yeah.
Kinda.
Torn up from the inside out, couldn't eat a bird. I don't even know how you can describe that sort of death.
Yeah. I don't know if I want to.
That is genuine body horror right there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it is.
But
10 out of 10 for that one.
Yeah, that was really special.
Mortis Ghost, if you ever hear this, that was great and wonderful. Thank you. That was I just went, oh no, that's really amazing, but oh no.
Yeah, I was legitimately getting chills at my spine during that fight. Actually, like as it progressed and the sprite continually got worse and worse and worse.
That was an A+ sprite work and music and atmosphere. This game just wonderful. I love it.
It's good stuff. Yeah, overall, I have a few little other ideas here and there, but like those are my like big thoughts. I'm assuming everyone has shared like their big ideas in terms of what they think the story is about.
Yeah. Oh,
one more tiny thing.
Okay. I have one more thing after that too. So you go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I might Godwin's Law it. I'm sorry. I apologize beforehand. Did anybody else get any Nazi vibes from this, other than me? Did anyone else get those vibes when you got to the crematorium and they go, "Oh, we're just shoveling the bodies in"? I went, "Uh-oh." Yeah. And the language
authoritarian morality in general.
Yep. Yeah. And the language they use when he's talking about purification and all of the language the batter uses, I would every once in a while I went, oh, what am I helping him do?
Yeah. Yeah. I was actually kind of surprised with all the language of purification that the game didn't seem to go further into religious themes. Because when I heard, purify the world, that was the first thing I thought of, but it didn't seem to follow that line as much as I expected it to.
It did with the add-ons. They were named the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost.
Wait, what?
Yeah, the add-ons.
I did not notice that.
If you went in their little bloop bloops, their status boxes, you could do it says the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost with the 3 different add-ons.
Yeah, those are their quote-unquote classes.
Yeah, I didn't notice that at all, so that's definitely a thing. Okay.
Well, I mean, like they talk a lot about strict, authoritarian morality, and organized religion is a big part of that. So he considers himself righteous. He considers himself right. Batter never stops to question what he does. There's he never actually has a moral decision in this game. The decision is in your hands of whether or not you stop him or let him do the thing that he refuses to stop doing.
Yeah.
So I would say that kind of rings true of that authoritarian mentality that comes with, classical, organized, authoritarian religion. So, just a theory.
Yeah.
Not insulting religious people. But yeah, so I think that's possible.
I actually just also remembered one other tiny thing. Did anyone else notice that whenever the workers explain the elements to you, they call it the first of 4 elements?
Yeah. Yes. I'm bringing that up in the video.
Yeah. that was yet another thing that made me think of certain issues and interpretations that I couldn't figure out how it fit into the whole rest of the thing, but it struck me as so interesting that each of them thought that almost like each of them thought it was the most important, even though they weren't necessarily saying that.
Mm-hmm. I think that's exactly what they were going for. Like, they're just like, my job is the most important job. I'm better, I'm righteous, I'm good, etc. That was a recurring theme. It's not like it's just the batter who does that. Like, just every leader of the area is like, I'm so good and this is the only way that the world can function. It can't function without me.
Yeah.
It might tie into some of the authoritarian stuff we were talking about earlier. Like, each area believes they are the most important area and are told as such by their higher-ups. And it's sort of just there is no war in Eurasia or whatever sort of a thing. Everybody believes, I'm making the most important element, so...
Yeah. Some of the reasoning was weird too, like something about without oceans people would just keep walking and walking with no borders. Like some of the reasoning was weird. It was just a really interesting thing in general.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the one thing that really weirded me out, and I wanted to try and figure out if any of you had any insights as to what the heck this was about. Did any of you do all of the extra stuff and fight Sugar?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah.
I did.
I did too.
I would not have realized it was there, but I wanted to make sure that I did stuff in the game, and so I looked it up to make sure that I was. And that, I don't know what that was. I just straight up don't know what that was. Does anyone have any ideas?
I think she's the sister of Nathaniel. That's his name, the shopkeep.
Yeah, the shop guy. They definitely had some kind of relationship.
Yeah, and because he was sad after she died, and if I remember right, and this could be a little off, he said that her dying was inevitable, or that what you did was going to be inevitable.
Yeah.
I think that he said it's for the best.
Down, yeah.
Yeah.
So she was bonkers?
I think that she's literally supposed to be a representation of a drug addict, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, or just madness at its purest.
Yeah.
She also said something, early on she said something about dancing, as metaphor for battle, obviously, and then once you beat her, she says, "I feel way too cold. I didn't like that dance, my old friend." And I wasn't sure what to do with that either. Largely
she has
because the whole
some connection.
Yeah, and it doesn't really help that the whole identity of the batter is such a kind of contentious metaphorical element of the story in the first place that I'm not entirely sure what that means.
Yeah.
Maybe she's an ex-lover. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's weird because you look at this stuff and it's like we've already talked about so much stuff, but we we haven't talked about Zachary or Sugar at all. Mm-hmm. Zachary is like the one consistent quote-unquote companion you have.
Yeah.
Like, he's a whack job. He's a special boy.
I actually have my notification tone on my phone is now him trying to meow when he's taking the judge's place for a while.
Yeah. Oh, man. But, yeah, dude,
There's just
weird.
a lot here. And that, that's why I had so much trouble coming up with anything that I felt was a cohesive theory, was that then I would come across something else and was like, well, I don't know what this means, so I don't know how it all fits. And, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, man, I don't know. It's like...
stuff.
It is. It's good stuff. I guess we all liked it.
Oh, yeah.
Because we all spent a lot of time thinking about it.
It's a thought-provoking game, for certain.
Oh, yeah. It's a fun one. I hope to make games as pretentious. But maybe not as cryptic, though.
It'd be hard to make.
Just the right amount of cryptic.
Just the right amount of cryptic. I want people to be able to think for themselves about what the story is saying. But,
yeah.
I don't like telling people what to think.
Hmm.
I just like getting them to think. So, I feel like we covered a lot of good ground here.
Yeah. Is there anything else we want to...
If anyone has like any other major things to say, speak now or forever hold your peace. Are we good?
Yeah, I think so. I've got this giant document of notes, but yeah.
Do you want to share anything?
We're all going to do a video, aren't we?
Yeah, we're all going to do videos.
I can already tell.
Possibly.
I feel like we're kind of at that point. But this was a really fun one.
Yeah.
This is a fun discussion. I'm glad we started this.
Me too.
I agree.
So,
all right.
Yeah,
well,
that's off. It's very special. If you still want to play the game, the link is down there.
Yep, definitely click on it and give it a go.
Yeah, so it's a magical experience that should be actually experienced for yourself. So now we're gonna move on and quickly discuss the next topic.
All right. So yeah, now that discussion is out of the way, I suppose it's time to announce what the next game is going to be. This one is being chosen by Chris, so he is going to give us a brief explanation of what it is.
So I'm trying to figure out how to do this in a way that works, because I don't want to get us in a situation where we announce a game and then everyone goes to play it and then we all go, this is awful. So with the caveat that we're still working out how to sort of have an emergency ripcord in case something goes terribly wrong in the month in between now and when we do the show. Because it might not be a game issue either. It might be a technical problem or whatever. But assuming that nothing goes wrong, the game I am putting forward to maybe talk about next month, don't get confused, is Anatomy by Kitty Horror Show. And it is a first-person horror-y game. It's very short. It's not pop jump scare spoopy. It's not it's not going to have things just flying out at you for no reason. And it's sort of an interesting take on not really body horror at all, but also kind of is also body horror. So it's pretty interesting, and I think it should give us a lot to talk about. Hopefully, it doesn't have as much as this game did. It is not a sprawling 6-hour epic of a million and one ideas that sort of is beyond our grasp. So I think we might be able to tackle it, but we'll see. It's pretty fun. I liked it. It was spoopy.
Looks very minimalist and.
This looks like fun.
Yeah.
All right. Well, looking
all
forward
these
to
horror
that,
games
then.
we're looking at. This is great.
Yeah. Off was like half horror, definitely.
Yeah.
So.
Well, as with the last time, this game as well will be linked in the description. So if you want to play it before we talk about it next month, which is of course highly recommended, then it is there. It's $3, so it's not free like Off was, but it's also not expensive, so it's not too bad. And it looks like it's available on Mac and Linux as well, so that's
Thank
neat.
God.
Yeah, so you can play this however you want. And so the plan will be to talk about that again a month from now. We're also going to start doing episodes in between these monthly episodes where we simply address some of the comments from the one before. So in about 2 weeks, you can plan on us having another episode out just talking about, addressing some of the things that you guys wanted to say in the comments of this episode talking about Off. So that will also be a thing. So, in that case, I think we're done for today. Anyone else have any parting words for our listeners?
I appreciate you, and you're special no matter what they say.
And MC's just always got the most
I
important.
always just, I want them to feel loved. It's important.
Well, in that case, thank you guys so much for watching. We all really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first episode was actually received very well and got a good deal of attention. I'm very glad that there are that many people interested in hearing the four of us wax poetic about these games.
Me too.
I'm also surprised that multiple people heard about, two, three, or all four of us.
Yeah, I kind of expected that most people would come into it having been familiar with one of us, and then most of that, of course, being Chris for Aaron's Signal. And
yeah.
But there were a lot of people that were happy that we specifically were talking about things together, so that's cool. Yeah. So anyway, thank you, all of you, for listening. We'll be talking about whatever you say in the comments a couple weeks from now, and then we'll be back to talk about Anatomy a month from now. So thank you very much for listening, and we will all see you then.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.